And welcome to Civil Discourse. I'm Jayme.
And I'm Marilyn Brown.
And today we are discussing two things. We're discussing political satire and comedy and Heineken's new, I guess, politically driven commercial coming right off the back of a very popular soda company's failed commercial. But I want to start first with the political satire. The reason I wanted to discuss this is because it's often a surprising debate amongst me and my more progressive friends who, I think political satire on the left is very similar to what I guess political talk shows are on the right. And I had a quote to start us off, but the quote is it's a little biased, but I think it's true, and it points to my kind of I don't want to say issues with political satire, but my confusion about whether it's mindful or not, or typically used mindfully or not. And the quote is by Jonathan Swift, and it is: "Satire is a mirror in which viewers discover everybody's face but their own. Its pleasure is a pleasure of othering."
Mm, that's interesting.
I know. Do you have any initial thoughts just on the quote?
Well, so off the quote, I've I definitely think that the quote is giving a true perspective that I hadn't really thought of. When you said it, it was like it kind of even made me like uncomfortable in a way that I think is part of what we enjoy so much about political satire and comedy, is that there is an othering, and it gives us kind of this ability to separate and feel, I don't know if the word is better than, but outside of something. And I also, and so even just that quote itself made me kind of feel like, ooh, like, that's kind of icky and true. And at the same time, I also think that satire, when done really effectively, has a way of allowing us to actually hold up a mirror to ourselves of things that maybe we wouldn't be able to digest if there wasn't some humor kind of surrounding it. And so, yeah, so I think for me, I'm definitely, of two minds about whether political comedy satire is actually mindful or not. I think that I think it can be, and it can also be very, very unmindful. But I do feel like there's a lot of times where I find myself questioning that when I'm watching certain things of like, is this helping?
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the question for me, because like anything else, it's just political satire is just a tool, and how it's used is really the important part of focus, to see if it's helping or if it's hurting us as a society, really, because of its prominence.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing for me is, if you actually Google the psychology of political satire, there are, and I was actually shocked by how many psychologists have decided to write about
Mm-hmm.
their kind of opinions of
Mm-hmm.
political satire. And what kind of stuck out to me as a, a common thread is um, is kind of well, our start is the purpose of comedy is the purpose of comedy is, as opposed to drama, is to make us feel good. It's to make us laugh. It's to kind of lighten the darkness, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And that has uh, two potential effects. It's either going to be a form of self help, to get you through the pain, or it's going to numb you.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's kind of what I see very often, and what there have been studies done, and the studies have shown this, that if you are a politically engaged person and you watch political satire comedy, it engages you more. It gives you more energy to be engaged.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are not, it numbs you to the the political process or the news, or because it's the other part of it is that really, when you people who consume the type of satire that um, goes along with their already preconceived ideology.
Mm-hmm.
So it's numbing the pain that's directly I don't want to say affecting you, but that you're already engaged with. It's not broadening um, a deeper conversation, which is the other issue I have with it, is that in order for it to be comedic, it's doing two things. It's coming through a comedic lens, so it's only telling you the sides of the story that are comedic, and to do that, it's overly simplifying. So what
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot is, I feel like I'm comfortable saying this. Most people I know have a very overly simplified idea of politics. It's very idealistic and kind of black and white in a
Mm-hmm.
way, and it's just not, it's not based in the reality of the nuance. And I think satire often feeds into that, because the point of it isn't to inform people, it's to be funny.
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So satire reinforces kind of the black and white thinking and the numbing effect, because like you said, the whole point is for comedy, and so it narrows it down to something that is funny. But if someone doesn't have enough of an understanding already or an interest in it, is already interested in politics and already has an understanding of how things work, to be able to say, okay, this is just satire, and they're narrowing it down so much to make it funny, then it can actually numb people out to the realities of what the process is, the impact
Mm-hmm.
of things. Yeah, I could definitely see how that can happen, and how the data would support that if you're already somebody who's active and politically engaged, that satire isn't necessarily going to um, have that same effect. But if that's all you're consuming, which I think for I don't know, I have no data or percentages on this, but I think that there's definitely a fair amount of people who most of how they get their news is through some sort of a satirical lens,
Mm-hmm.
um, or at least a large percentage of it, and when I say large percentage, I mean like half, which I think is a lot, but I definitely feel like that's becoming more of the norm. And so when that happens, I think that we're losing our ability to be mindful about the actual process.
Yeah, and another thing that I read in a lot of the articles was um, the psychology of the subtext of making fun of uh, politics specifically, but that also goes into the news and all those things. Is that um, for a lot of people, what happens is Jon Stewart, or whatever it is making fun of the the political process, our politicians, and there it's not just, they do it equally when it's warranted, but
Mm-hmm.
what that often does to people, based on these psychologists who are dealing with with people and have studied this, is that it subconsciously makes you feel like politics is a joke. So then it, and if you feel, and then this is me making a jump, that if someone feels like politics is a joke, they're much less likely to then engage and vote and take it seriously on any level because they think it's a joke.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that, yeah, a lot of this I've never really thought about. So it's just kind of like, huh, I could definitely see how that can happen. And I also feel like there is, I don't know, I don't want to just say right now, but I think there's at times a need for humor,
Right.
as a
Mm-hmm.
coping mechanism. And I feel like there's a lot of that, that we're seeing a lot more, um, of kind of this collective, like, coping around humor in certain ways. And I think that that can be helpful, and I think it can be therapeutic, but I also do think that anything that's helpful can also be numbing, and can
Right.
also cause us to disengage, and can be overused to kind of cause us to not really feel or do anything. And so it's difficult to kind of know how much is too much, or when it's appropriate and when it's not. Um, but I do think that, part of that process of finding humor, um, in difficult times is something that we're seeing that I think is can be healing for people.
Right. And I think I believe that that is the intention of
Hmm.
the vast majority of these comedians. I mean, they often say that that is why they're doing it in multiple interviews, and it seems genuine. So I completely believe that that is what it is. Um, yeah, it's just a hard situation because it's like anything else. It's like mindfulness itself. It can be used for good or used to hinder us, and I see it doing doing both. So then, me being me, I try to figure out, well, is it doing vastly more of one than the other, and then being being kind of the analytical person that I am, you make jumps and you see kind of connections that you don't know if it's a connection or if it's just because you're looking that you see it. Like I'm thinking about I just the connection between that and Donald Trump, and not necessarily in his political stances or anything like that, but just in his his performance,
Hmm.
the way he kind of um, built his momentum and his support base. A lot of it had to do with his politics, but a lot of it had to do with the performance he was
Yes.
putting on. And I mean, he admits that that is what it is, and it was a performance almost rooted in satire and in the way satire portrays um, politicians. So
Hmm.
it's just it's interesting, and I'm not saying that there's a connection there. I just find it interesting that the way satire consistently portrays politicians is kind of what we got on a real scale.
Right. Yeah. What actually ended up kind of becoming our reality. Um, yeah. No, I think that that's definitely, um, an interesting thing to think about. And I definitely think, you could kind of see even how he responds, at rallies, kind of to the crowd, that it is a performance, and it is kind of he's almost in the way a comedian would kind of get up there and, like, see what jokes work, and kind of what things, are landing with the crowd. And yet that's also kind of what we've been consuming. You look at a lot of the media that people, watch, listen to, share. There's a lot of kind of that type of um, media and that type of information out there. And so I think, it, it's consistent with how we've kind of evolved into, and our interest in the last, decade or so, or 15 years, especially, with the with reality TV and those types of things. And so it's like it kind of makes sense that this is our reality. And at the same time, it's, how do we go in the other direction? How do we start to move away from this? Um, I don't even know what the word is I'm looking for. But
Right,
this,
and
yeah.
I think that, I mean, the answer really is mindfulness. If you love political satire, I mean, I'm just trying to engage in interesting conversation. I'm not trying to sway anyone to think that it's like bad and they shouldn't watch it. It's about watching it mindfully and
Mhm.
seeing it for what it is, and using it for what it is. The thing that kind of frustrates me sometimes is I will see a lot of um, political debates um, that are fueled by people sharing satire and political comedy to prove their points,
Mhm.
and it's it just it's so simplified that it it just I don't even know how to engage in
Mhm.
that kind of arena, I guess, because it's not an actual argument. It's not meant to inform you of
Mhm.
what's really going on in the complexities. So you can develop your own well-informed opinion. It's there to make you laugh,
Right.
and as long as people are mindful that that is the purpose and that's what they use it for, then it's useful. It is that kind of that release and that
Mhm.
moment to just not be overwhelmed, and part of self-care. But if it's being used as a way to inform yourself or feel like, I mean, a lot I see it, to be blunt, as a way for people to feel superior in a very simple way to the other, like the quote
Mhm.
that
Right.
we said at the beginning. Um,
Right. It kind of
if
just
you're
validates.
using it that way, it's not mindful.
Right. Yeah. It's like using it to kind of just validate your own opinions rather than actually being using it to increase your awareness, using it, like you said, as a tool, using it as something to laugh at, as a way, as an outlet, but not um, using it as like ammunition against
Right.
conflicting opinions.
Right.
But also recognizing, I think as we're talking about that, one thing I realized too is that, people are people and there's always going to be a percentage of that, and so it's like
Of
kind of
course.
realizing, fine, just not engaging and but being able to open people up to another way of looking at it. Like I think that that's why I
Hmm.
like that we're talking about this, because like you said, it's not, criticizing people and telling people not to watch it. I'm going to continue to watch what I watch, but I'm going to, I think, actually I know, for sure, just because we had this discussion, I'm definitely going to be more mindful and even just, even being more curious about that discomfort that I sometimes feel when I am watching something that, I might laugh at, but still have that kind of, you know, uncomfortable feeling in my stomach, being more curious. Okay, well, what's this about? And looking at that as well. So um, I think that's important for us to do with everything, but also recognizing that, you know, especially with comedy, it is going to be, it's a quick kind of easy way um, to cope or to deflect. It's a great tool for a lot of different things, and so
Yeah.
unfortunately we're going to kind of see all of that.
Right. And there was another narrative that I saw a lot that I actually don't think I agree with. And it's not that I don't agree with it. It's the way that um, it was often worded in a lot of the articles I was reading.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that satire discourages discussion and the exchange of ideas. And what I don't like about it is that almost everyone used some variation of the word discourages. Um, and I just think that's what am I trying to say? It doesn't discourage it. It's just that's not the point of it. The point of it is to be funny and be kind of an individual thing. It's not meant, like I was saying before, to be fuel to argue a very complex point across. So what I would say is on being mindful is just realizing that
Mm-hmm.
the purpose of it is really and comedy is to be for you. It's not for you to and engage and argue with others.
Right.
It doesn't and it doesn't when they're presenting politics through a comedic lens as a statement. They're not going deeper to try to start conversations and do those things because that's not the point. So don't try to make it into that. I think that's where things start to go awry, is when people try to start that conversation using that satire.
Right, right. And I think that's hard too because it's like we're so encouraged to do even that, which is very not mindful. But you think about Facebook and, like, there'll be a clip of, some political satire that's gone viral and we share it. And it's like the whole point of sharing something is that you're starting a conversation about it, And so it's funny because even as you're describing that, I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we're also kind of counter conditioned to do the opposite and just to share all of these things and start conversations pretty unmindfully, not realizing that each time we share something, we are actually starting a conversation, unless you close your comments and, whatever. But for the most part, even being mindful about that, I think
Mm-hmm.
is important because, there's a lot of times where I'll share something because I just think it's funny and I think it's interesting. And then, a whole conversation or debate will ensue. And I don't even realize that my intention was just, haha, well, look at this. And then, but I'm not being mindful of the fact that social media is kind of there to start conversations about these things,
Mm-hmm.
about what you're posting.
Right, and I think it's not that there shouldn't be a conversation. We shouldn't start conversation. It's just that what we should be doing is starting a conversation around political satire. What I see now is that we have debates of people
Mm-hmm.
who have a formed opinion that is unchangeable, using satire to support those opinions, when
Right.
satire is comedy. It is not fact based, fully contextualized information.
Right. Yeah. Good point.
Okay, so I think that was a very good conversation. I need to get that out. um,
Mm.
uh, so you watched the new Heineken commercial.
I did. I did
Okay.
watch the new Heineken commercial.
So I'll give a quick breakdown for anyone who hasn't seen it. Um, one, I thought it was great, but basically what it was I think three pairs of people who, and I don't know if these were actors or if they were actually real people. I don't. For me, it wouldn't matter. It was just a good commercial.
Mm-hmm.
But the premise was that it was groups of two people who didn't know each other, who had to build some kind of a bar. They had to build a bar together and then answer questions that they picked out. I don't know if they were just reading cards or they picked them out of a box or what they did, but they were I would consider them intimate questions,
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
controversial questions. But
Yeah.
they were
Some,
yeah. It was like kind of discussing how they saw themselves and kind of their growing up and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Things that you wouldn't talk about right off the bat with someone.
Right.
So then, after they had talked for a while, they have the bar made and they watch a screen where each person has done a video that they made before they had met about a political issue. I think one was climate change, one
Mm-hmm.
was feminism, and one was being transgendered.
Yeah.
And each of these pairs had contrasting views. And they watched the videos of the other person having the contrasting views and making the statements that they did it smartly, that were directly affecting someone who was there. And then at the end, they just had to decide if they wanted to have a beer together and discuss those counter views or if they wanted to leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what was your kind of view? And my headset's dying, so I'm gonna change this real quick. But you can tell us our view. I'm still paying attention.
I thought it was awesome. I love just how they set everything up. I think that, like, you know, when I watch a lot of things nowadays, I kind of watch them and I'm like, you can tell that somebody who understands like human behavior and you know, is a researcher in that area kind of consulted on it, because even just giving them a task to work on together, they had to build something. They didn't know what they were building. They had to kind of have this collective you know, teamwork on something. And so that was really cool. And I liked the questions that they had them ask each other. I think one of the first ones was like, describe yourself in 5 adjectives, something like that. And that really resonates with me. That's something that I've tried to do in the last couple of years. I feel like we oftentimes, when we meet people as adults, you know, one of the first questions you ask is, what do you do? What do you do for a living? You know, usually we mean, what do you do to make money? And, you know, I really have tried to kind of get away from asking that and trying to find out more about people when I actually meet them and ask more interesting questions about someone. And so I like that, you know, they gave them this opportunity to share something that, like you said, wasn't like so personal that you wouldn't want to tell a stranger, but just things that you would never even think to share with a brand new person. And I think that it just really showed how powerful it is when we connect before we judge, you know, and when we allow ourselves to like see each other's humanity and see each other as people rather than just our views or our ideas about things, that then you can find out things about someone and their views that are maybe challenging, but find a way to still want to engage with that person and to talk with that person and have a conversation because you've connected already and you have that empathy, you have that shared humanity rather than just seeing each other as on opposite sides of a view or, you know, of an issue. And so I feel like it just really showed, and I agree with you that it didn't really matter to me whether it was actors or not, but it just showed that, you know, if we don't have the walls up initially, that we can actually get somewhere and have a conversation, and that's the important thing.
Right, and I think I only heard about half of that because my thing went off. But so if I'm repeating, I apologize. But what stuck out for me was one, the contrast between the it was Pepsi, right, or was it Coke?
Pepsi.
It was Pepsi. That commercial, and just what I liked about it was that it was political, but not political. It wasn't making, and some people may disagree with me, but it wasn't making any statement about picking a side on any of these issues. People of both sides were present and there and made a decision together to come together and talk about it and to just learn more about another human. And that's the first step. Obviously, that's not to say that's the way everything's going to be fixed by people just talking and whatnot. But
Right.
it's a great first step, because I think a lot of our political problems are rooted in the fact that we don't actually talk about these things in a meaningful and respectful way with people who disagree with us or just have a different worldview. The other thing that I think is interesting is, and I always feel this way when this topic is discussed, but one of the topics discussed was feminism,
Mm-hmm.
and the you had a very strong feminist and a man who basically said that he felt like feminism was just at this point an attack on men and
Mm-hmm.
meant to take power away from men.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that there is about a word. Like, I'm wondering now, if it was real and those people had a meaningful conversation, how different actually were their views,
Yeah.
because they clearly had two different definitions of what feminism meant. So if you took that word away, would they actually agree on things?
Yeah, yeah, that's actually right along the lines of what I was thinking with that too. Is that a lot of times when you can have the conversation, what you realize is you're actually saying the same things. They've just labeled it differently, and and so being it because when they actually talked about it, and she was able to kind of share a little bit about herself and what that means. He's like, yeah, right on. You're like, you're a strong, like confident woman. Like that's cool. And I support that, and realizing like that I think a lot of how we're kind of conditioned to see the other side is that um, that they're trying to take something away from us, that they're trying to kind of that this person having rights means that I'm not going to. And what you realize is that a lot of times people are actually saying the same thing. I remember after the election, one of those kind of roundtable discussions that they had with Trump supporters and Hillary Clinton supporters. And when they actually sat down and were talking through the issues, they wanted the same things, and really had the same kind of concerns and needs, but things were labeled so differently that they felt like they were on the complete opposite side. So I think that that commercial really kind of shows the power in just being able to, again, have that conversation, that a lot of times we realize that as humans, we really are wanting kind of the same things.
Right. And the other thing I think is that I want to point out is um, mindfulness in those situations. What a normal debate looks like, from my experience living in America, is that someone says something and you interpret it the way you think it should be interpreted, instead of looking for what they're actually trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was, I don't think many people, I don't know if people pick up on it. For me, it was jarring, but it wasn't something that was necessarily intentional. Was the pair with the older white man and the transgendered woman.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Basically, she was a transgender woman who easily passed as female, and they had spent that time together, and he had no clue. And then the video came, and he was talking about how he didn't. I didn't think he said anything nasty about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a commercial, so they wouldn't probably put that, even if he did. But
Right.
it was just basically he said something along the lines that he thought it was unnatural or something, and that a
Yeah.
man should be a man and a woman should be a woman. And then he watched the video of um, her saying that she was trans, and then they did a little like cop out where he goes to leave and then he turns back around and sits down, and they talk about it, and he says that he grew up being taught that the world was black and white, and the older he gets, the more he realizes that there's a gray period. But the thing that stuck out to me was the way he said he didn't agree with being trans was not necessarily attack on trans people. It was
Mm-hmm.
a, a declaration of not understanding it. And it could that can come across as being aggressive or not being, but at the
Mm-hmm.
heart of it, that's what he is saying.
Right.
And the I give a lot of props if it was real, for the woman who stayed, because she immediately sat down to um, see that in there, and to know that, just engaging and meeting that person and being there could change that person, because really all the person was saying that is that he didn't understand it, and she was there basically to say, well, I'm living it, so let me share that understanding to the best of my ability with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that has the power to really, um, change minds and change them very quickly.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I agree. That duo was kind of one of my favorite parts of the commercial. I mean, I loved the whole commercial. I think it was like four and a half minutes or so. And I thought the whole thing was great, but that kind of that moment between those two really stuck out to me as um, an opportunity for growth on his part, because yeah, it didn't sound malicious. It just sounded like he just really didn't understand and had never been expected to or challenged to do so, you know.
And I feel like that's how, I'm gonna say most, because I think it would be over a majority. I think there's a big group where this wouldn't happen, but I think that's how the conversation would go with most people of different views, because it goes back to what we were saying with the satire. What's kind of happened is the country's become so divided, and it's so easy to consume, media of all kinds that, instead of challenging us in any way, just
Mm-hmm.
reinforce our biases,
Yeah,
and constantly tell us that anyone who disagrees with us is an other.
it's
It's
wrong.
part of that othering, that you that's where that aggression comes from. But then when you're actually in a situation where that other is no longer the other and is there with you as a human being, that stuff starts to kind of fade away.
Yeah, yeah,
I
definitely.
mean, there's, of course there's people who are, um, so hold on so tight to it that
Mm-hmm.
the conversation can never happen, because they're dealing with their own issues, and until they get themselves to a place where they're open enough to receive new information, nothing's
Right.
going to happen. But for
Mm-hmm.
for the most people, I truly believe that engaging with people on a meaningful level that
Mm-hmm.
disagree with you in a respectful way is going to be good for everyone involved.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. So if you guys have not seen the Heineken commercial, definitely check it out. It's there. They have a hashtag for it. It's hashtag Open Your World. So that was kind of that's their campaign that they're doing right now. So hashtag Open Your World if you guys haven't watched that commercial yet.
And then the homework. Ooh, I have two. One is to watch the
Oh,
commercial, and
yes.
I think the other, should be, uh you can either just do your views on the commercial, or if you want to kind of dive into the satire conversation, um, how you use satire mindfully, and that's whether you choose to consume it or not, but how mindfulness can be used and how you approach it in a mindful way.
Yeah, I like that. All
Awesome.
right.
And that's, again, we have a Facebook group, where the conversation is ongoing, and that is Mindfulness and Action Civil Discourse. So you can join us there, or on Twitter, or on our Facebook page at Civil D TV.
All right. See you guys next week.
Bye. Have a good one.